back. You're still watching NTV Weekend Edition. Now, President Yoweri Museveni says that persons suspected of murder should not be granted police bond and bail. The president said he was sad and angry following the recent murders, but confident that security agencies were working to restore security and fight crime in the country. Now, these remarks were made during the budget reading on Thursday here at the Serena Conference Center. But are these punitive measures? And what about the law of the land? To discuss this with me is Nicholas Opio, the Executive Director, Chapter 4. Nicholas Opio, welcome to NTV this evening.
Always a pleasure, and I'm glad to be here.
Right, now let's start with the statements the President made just early this week on Thursday during the reading of the budget. What's your reaction?
President Museveni's forte, if there's any, has been the fact that he's been able to restore peace and security in the country. But this is slipping away from him. Many Ugandans don't feel safe with the abduction and killing of women, the killing of local businessmen. Nobody feels safe. As somebody mentioned online, you are alive because nobody wants to kill you. In other words, we are alive not because of the safety and security provided by government, but we are at the mercy of criminals. And so, understandably, he was rattled by the killing of the Honorable Ibrahim Abiriga. He was really rattled, and I think that it's an unfortunate statement made in the fit of anger that a head of state shouldn't be making, especially in a country that, at least in theory, is a constitutional democracy. I think that perhaps having sought better legal counsel, the president would not have said what he said, or if indeed he knew the things he was saying, then he was doing so in legal ignorance.
Yeah. Now, he did, of course, call out the Chief Justice on that day as he aired out his grievances, to the public entirely. But the Chief Justice, of course, wrote back in a statement and said, we will follow the law as is set by the Constitution. But in the letter, of course, he also, there is a statement which says, in case they need or they feel they need to change the law, then they should, follow the constitutional way it's supposed to be changed. What's your reaction to that statement?
Well, first of all, watching the body language of the Chief Justice and his deputy, when the president made that statement, it was very clear that they were uncomfortable. You saw them moving on their chairs and whispering to each other. And I think that it was right for the Chief Justice to come out and defend the rule of law. We must applaud him for doing so. It takes courage for someone to speak back at the president in those terms, and especially in moments when he's so desperate and dangerous as he is right now. But I think that the suggestion, the insinuation in the statement that seems to say that we can amend the law to remove bail and bond is perhaps reading too much into his statement. I don't think the Chief Justice by any means would not defend the sacrosanct right to a fair hearing, which presupposes that somebody is innocent until that person has been proven guilty or that person has pleaded guilty himself or herself. I think that the Chief Justice could have been more clearer in defending that fundamental right and freedom, in defending the discretion of courts in the application of laws in regard to bail, in defending the role of investigators in regard to issuance of bond. But I think that beyond the Chief Justice, we yet to hear from the DPP. The DPP is the chief investigator in this country. The DPP advises the police who issue bonds. I think that such institutions must come up and pronounce themselves whether they agree or don't agree with the statement of the president.
Right. Now, for those who were, watching the president's speech on that day, Thursday, as he, made comments, he also said he would come and address Parliament the coming week on Wednesday. But then, of course, reading out of his statements, what then does that mean for presumption of innocence as a non-derogable right, in our Constitution? Of course, basing on the fact that some of the people who were arrested earlier in, the case of the late AIGP Kawesi and many other people who have been shot dead were found not guilty. What then would happen?
Look, I think the president demanding to address Parliament on security is an indictment to the security chiefs who just days ago addressed the country on the security situation. It's an indictment on their performance. And I think that the president had better be reassuring, not lashing out the way he has been in the past, calling people swines and all kinds of names, using indecorous language. But I think that the president ought to reassert the importance of security, but also the importance of the rule of law. We're only safe in a country where the rule of law is applied equally to everybody. We must admit inherent failures in the country's intelligence. Forget about investigations after the fact. The failure, the catastrophic failure in the intelligence network in this country, he must admit it honestly, because the buck stops at his desk. He must take responsibility and commit to this country to doing better going forward. Secondly, the presumption of innocence. And perhaps the president is better advised. If you go around cutting the forests of laws, if you're a monkey, you might have nowhere to hide the next time. General Kalakaihura is now asking for the laws to be applied to him that he denied hundreds of people when he was IGP.
He made statements, of course, castigating the opposition and saying members of the opposition who incite the public and, cause commotion should not be given police bond.
The president is perhaps playing to the political gallery in saying the things that he said. I think that all peace-loving Ugandans, all lawful people who love the law, rule of law, must condemn the president's action and reject it. We must repudiate those statements, because those statements have no place in a democracy. I think that the president perhaps is, and he's been consistent on his disregard for fundamental freedoms, especially in relation to bail and bond. I think that the time to remind him is now, that those statements don't belong to a country that has a constitution. This is not a monarchy. Museveni is not a king. He's a president elected by the people. He swore by the Bible to uphold the constitution, to protect the constitution. Those statements are not statements of protecting the constitution. In fact, strictly speaking, it would amount to an abrogation of our constitution and the crime of treason.
If I can just take you to, one of our stories that we had earlier in this bulletin, where the Member of Parliament, Betty Nambooze, is currently, of course, being held by the police, and a few things were taken not in the right way. Parliament was not notified that we will pick this Member of Parliament, and she's not feeling well. Police is not letting her go. What does that kind of situation read out to us, especially, the ordinary person?
The Nambooze situation is a direct response to President Museveni's statement at the budget speech in regards to police bond. The day before that, Nambooze had been granted bond and was supposed to report back on the 19th. The president makes the remarks he makes, the police react and recall Nambooze from her hospital bed and detain her indefinitely for an offense that doesn't involve any personal violence, doesn't involve any public disorder. Really, it's a misdemeanor. That statements that you said are being investigated. And so if something happens to Nambooze, if, God forbid, something happens to her, the police leadership and the president must take personal responsibility for their actions. I think what is being done to her is high-handed, it's unnecessary, it's a complete violation of her fundamental right and freedom, not just as an MP, but as a Ugandan woman. Especially in a week when the police, to their credit, met women to reaffirm their commitment to the protection of women and girls in this country.
Yeah.
I think that such actions as detaining Nambooze, cancelling her bond which they had issued, is unnecessary. And I think that the police must demonstrate that the police under council is different from the police under General Kalakaihura. These actions do not show a difference of approach or a difference of principle. And if there are any lessons to learn from General Kalakaihura, then Mr. Okoth-Ochola must perhaps react differently to such situations.
Generally, the outlook of the rule of law in the country, what do you make of it?
The longer President Museveni stays in power, the more we disregard the rule of law. Fundamental rights become more pronounced by their lack of observance than by our adherence to them. Go to any police station, there are people who have spent 2 months, 3 months without being produced in court. At the CMI in Mbuya headquarters, the last time a suspect came out of their cells, there were over 50 young people in that place. Go to prisons, you have 54% of the prison population on pretrial detention. Others have stayed as long as 6 years, never seen a courthouse. Most of whom are people below the age of 35. Young people who are supposed to be productive and working. So I think for me, unless we pay specific attention to the rule of law in this country, we are going down a dangerous path. And by the way, that has a direct impact on investment. Don't be deceived that the rule of law and economic development are divorced from, they are mutually inclusive. In a country where there's a rule of law, investors have confidence to come and invest money. Nobody wants to come to a country where people don't respect the rule of law. So we are deeply concerned about the state of the rule of law in this country, the weaknesses in institutions like the directive of public prosecutions, the court system, the police system, public service as a whole. So I think for me we must go back and recommit ourselves to the principle of protecting human rights, human dignity, fairness and equality in this country.
Thank you very much, Nicholas Opio, for joining us tonight. And that was Talk of the Nation tonight.
Newsbite is brought to you by
Safe Drive Uganda, improving road safety.